Hello there. What is going on, everybody? Today we're going to be talking about the Clone Wars for Armada, and I'm going to be trying to bring to you a consolidation of all the information that we have right now. Everything we know about the Clone Wars coming to Star Wars Armada. Let's just break it all down, everything we've got. Based off of originally their announcements, all the questions that have been asked and answered, as well as every bit of new information we got from last night's live stream Ask Me Anything with Andrew Navaro, because that was actually quite informative, and I just wanted to consolidate all of the Clone Wars Armada information because that was pretty much one of the main topics of information. So we're going to talk about all of that. Also, there is still time left to enter the $100 Amazon gift card giveaway. You just have to be a subscriber and leave a comment on this or one of my videos. It's as simple as that. So just make sure you click that subscribe button. Let me know what you think about Clone Wars Armada. Let me know what you want to see in the Clone Wars Armada down in the description below. So when are we going to be getting Clone Wars Armada? So right now, the current target is late 2020. Now that could mean anywhere in 2020, that's in the second half, but most likely we're going to probably expect December 2020. Late. That's the tentative goal. Hopefully it could be sooner than that. Could be even in theory third quarter 2020. But one of the things that's influenced this target projection is some of the difficulties that were had with Armada ships. Andrew Navaro did talk about how Armada ships are very expensive and difficult to produce, more so than a lot of other items, because they're so big and there's a lot more detail that goes into making a really large, painted, highly detailed miniature. And so while the Armada ships are bigger and expensive to make, expensive to buy, all of that, it can definitely lead to a lot of production problems and slowdowns. And they don't want to repeat the same mistake they made with the Superstar Destroyer, in that you announce something and then you get maybe almost a whole year's worth of delay out of it. So they don't want that. So they're currently targeting late 2020. So let's go for December of 2020 is when we'll currently expect that. If we get it sooner than that, that would be great. Personally, between you and me, I think it is reasonable that it's, if everything goes well and everything goes really, really good, we could be looking at third quarter 2020 with a possible best case scenario of a Gen Con pre-release. But that's best case scenario, and it's important that you don't really expect that. If it happens, that would be great, but more than likely we'll look for quarter 4 of 2020. And also, if there are some problems unforeseen, it might even be first quarter 2021. So, but the current projection is late 2020. Now, I've said that about 6 or 7 times just because that's the number one question everybody asks. When are we going to get it? And while that is the current projection, we you have to caveat everything with it. It could all change. It could all change. So the point is it's going to be a long ways out. And we don't have a whole lot to hold us over until then, but we do have some things. We've got Rebellion in the Rim getting ready to come out very soon. We also have 2 new ships that are coming out in fourth quarter of 2019. This does potentially mean that we'll go a long time without any new content, and I will also say that they did more or less clarify that there probably isn't anything else coming out for Armada between the Starhawk and Onager Wave 8 release. So they did call that Wave 8 in the live stream. So that is actually a cool thing to know that the SSD wasn't technically Wave 8. So, there was some speculation on what it was. But after the Starhawk and Onager come out, there shouldn't be anything else coming out before the Clone Wars comes out. So that is basically what we know right now. So the Clone Wars will be the next release after Starhawk and Onager. How are we going to get it? Well, we don't really know if it's going to be a core set or if it's going to be an a la carte release. In other words, if it will just be a bunch of different ships, or how they're going to actually approach the release. We don't know what the boxing or production mechanism that they're going with to deliver it. And I cite 2 different examples of Clone Wars. In the case of X-Wing, they did not give it a core set. Instead, they just gave it like an individual ship starter or an individual faction starter that had a couple of ships in a bundle, but didn't have the damage deck and the other things that you needed to play the game. Whereas with Star Wars Legion, they went with an entire box core set approach. They could take either approach or they could take a different approach, but we don't know that information yet, and that was asked and not answered. So it is possible that is still a subject of debate or maybe not finalized yet, because I would love to see a standalone starter that does not have any ships in it, so people can get into the game and pick their ships a la carte and not have to buy a $100 starter that has ships for a faction they're not interested in playing. So I would love to get a cheaper Essentials kit that has all of that information and all of that stuff, but we'll have to see. So another question is that I asked in the Ask Me Anything is, once Clone Wars comes out, are we going to have this slow release schedule where we only get, one new ship per faction per year, or one or two new ships a year, or is it going to be an increase? My question is, are we going to get an increase in production and release for the Clone Wars Armada? And the answer was a definitive yes, an absolute yes. So we're going to see a rapid increase in an Armada product once the Clone Wars does come out. So this is a really, really good bit of news for Armada players and Clone Wars fans. We have been in a kind of a stale point in time where we're getting maybe one thing a year for a little while. Now it hasn't always been this bad, but we have had a couple of dry spells in Armada, namely between waves 2 and 3, and then right now, with the big wait up until the Superstar Destroyer's release, and that's unfortunate, and I don't think that was always the plan. But as of right now, the plan is to have a lot more product coming out for the Clone Wars factions when they do come out, to try to help get those caught up to the existing factions. It was also clarified that eventually, once they get ramped up sufficiently, then the waves will slow back down. However, they will not, hopefully, the plan is not to slow them down to as slow as they have been. So while we may, an example of what that might be is that might mean we get, the launch wave of core set stuff, or core set or launch. I'm gonna just refer to it, and let's just say core set for right now, whatever form that may take. We get that core launch, and then maybe that a month or two afterwards we get some supplemental ships to to have more full builds, and then maybe a month or two later we get some more ships. Then it may slow down to another wave every 6 months or something like that. That's kind of one way to look at that. But hopefully it won't just be one or two ships a year. It should be slightly more than that, but not super frequent once they get the Republic and Separatists kind of caught up and brought into the fold. And one of the reasons that they're going with is, in general, a slower release schedule for Armada is primarily the fact that there just simply aren't as many recognizable canon capital ships. Well, they didn't say canon, but I mean that is really one of the things that they tend to go for. They tend to go for the things that are canon. I'm willing to bet that this has a lot to do with Disney kind of saying, hey, we kind of want to promote the stuff that it represents the new movies. So there's obviously incentive for them to focus on things that are canon, but at the same time they want to focus on things that are very, very recognizable, because it's an investment thing. If it's very expensive to make Armada ships, and then let's say less than 10% of the player base buys this new ship because they don't recognize it, well then that's going to be a major failure. So they kind of pointed out in some of the design process for new ships is they kind of have to go with what's recognizable. They kind of want to go with things that are more likely to sell, and that is one of the things that motivates their design decisions. So while there may be something from Legends that you really, really wanted to see made, it may not be popular enough. Now, fortunately, with Clone Wars, most of that stuff is both canon and recognizable. Clone Wars are very, very popular amongst a lot of people who are now young adults that have disposable income, who maybe have grown up with the Clone Wars. So you're getting a lot of recognizable ships, so that's a good thing. But at the same time, for the Galactic Civil War factions, the well is beginning to run a little bit dry there. Now, a lot of you might say, no, it's not dry. There's all these other ships that they can do. And I agree with you. There is a lot, because I am a Star Wars fan. I'm willing to buy, a lot more stuff than maybe somebody who's just more of a casual fan might be willing to buy. And so I think that's kind of one of the things that motivates what they're going to do next. As far as the Clone Wars coming out, though, I also asked, are we going to get continued support for the for the rebellion and the empire? And that was another definitive yes. There will absolutely be more rebellion and empire ships that do come out. Now, that was kind of when they kind of branched into the whole, but the well is starting to run dry. So that's one reason why we're not getting, an expansion every month like we get with Legion, for example, because there's, with the ground game and then the starfighters and stuff, there's a whole lot more stuff that's available for them to be able to make, whereas for capital ships there's a whole lot less. I mean, go watch the original trilogy again, and how many Imperial capital ships are you going to see? You're going to see like 3 different types. That's it. You're going to see the Super Star Destroyer, you're going to see an ISD-1 and an ISD-2. That's it for capital ships. Now, obviously, there's more than that, as you expand and stuff. But at a certain point, you really start to scrape the bottom of the barrel. Like, how many of you had even seen an Onager before they announced it? And now, granted, I think it looks pretty cool, but that's part of the point, is that there's just there's a limits to how much stuff they can realistically make and expect to sell a lot of, because they part of the design process is to make sure that people recognize stuff. So there was also a question asked about huge ships, and they said, will the rebels get, and this question was worded in a certain way that made me think it could have been worded better. It was not one of my questions, but it was, will the rebels get a huge ship like the Super Star Destroyer? And that answer was basically no, just a firm no. And there's a little bit more to this, and it wasn't this does tie in to the Clone Wars a little bit, but it's important to know that they said, while there is a huge ship that the rebels could get that works as far as the lore goes, and of course they're talking about the Viscount from Legends. I'm pretty sure he didn't name it specifically, but he said there was a ship they could do, which is actually kind of telling, because that does tell you that they have at least the ability to continually pull from Legends if there's a need. They didn't believe that. I don't think basically they didn't believe that would have as much appeal to be able to produce and sell a $200 something ship that might not sell that well. And they felt it was worth taking that risk with the Super Star Destroyer, primarily because it was so iconic and so recognizable. There are a lot of people posting on social media. I see a lot of people posting on Twitter about the Super Star Destroyer, people who don't even play Armada, that just want this thing because it's very recognizable. I would make the case that you have a much smaller subsection of people who would spend $200 on a Viscount, simply due to recognizability. And so, you're going to sell much, much less, and it just may not be economically viable to be able to produce and market something like that if you're not going to make any profit off of it. So, the business side of things simply has to also work out, and that's just an unfortunate way of the world works. So I think that's why we're basically won't be seeing a Viscount. But I think some people were saying, I've seen some people in some chat format and some formats in social media saying they said no more huge ships. Well, that's not exactly true. They didn't say no more huge ships, but they just said they're not going to do another huge ship the size of the Super Star Destroyer, and specifically for the Rebels. However, not all huge ships have to be quite as big as the Executor. For example, the Lucrehulk behind me here. This totally could be a huge ship with 2 bases side by side instead of front to back. And that would work perfectly. And it is a pretty big ship. It's not nearly as big as the Executor, but it's certainly bigger than an Imperial Star Destroyer. And it certainly could qualify as a huge ship. It's kind of on the borderline where you could make the case for it being a large ship as well, and you could probably put its base on that center ball section, but it would be awfully big just to be a large ship. So I would prefer the Lucrehulk serve the function of a huge ship. I just feel it could be a huge ship that specializes as a really, really effective carrier, while I think Separatists also have the capability to do the Malevolence as a huge ship that would be more of a super weapon kind of ship, something a little bit more akin to the Super Star Destroyer. And we certainly saw that in the Clone Wars with its giant ion cannon. It could even launch a physical slow-moving projectile that might ionize ships as it goes past them. I think it would be perfect. And that ship is actually much larger than a Lucrehulk, and is closer to Super Star Destroyer size, while not really being that big. So it wouldn't have to be 25 inches long. Maybe they could get away with doing it at about 16 inches long or something like that. Would make it kind of fit as far as the sliding scale goes for Armada. I think that would be fine. But my point is, they didn't say no more huge ships. They just said none quite as big as the Executor, and that makes perfect sense to me. Not all huge ships have to be the biggest one they'd ever do. That was just maybe the most iconic one. And since they're going into Clone Wars, you have the Lucrehulk and the Malevolence that are both very recognizable and were very popular. I think we'll absolutely get those. So that is basically, I think that's about all of the information we really have right now. They really didn't talk a whole lot more about Clone Wars other than to say that they're definitely doing it. It's definitely coming. Well, we're going to be getting a lot more stuff, and there will be continued stuff for the Rebels and Empire as well. So it's very exciting. I can't wait to find out more information, and I will definitely keep you guys up to speed on it. But if you do find people who are asking you, when is it coming out? When are we going to know? At the end of next year, end of 2020 is what we're currently looking at. And you can reference this video to them if you want, or you can just, keep following me. And as more information comes out, I will bring it to you. But it is coming, folks, and it's going to be great. I'm sure it will be. That's I actually had a quote from Matt Holland saying it's going to be fantastic. So, take from that what you will. All right, guys, that's all I've got for you today. I want to thank you all so much for watching, and as always, have a great day.